One of the lesser-known game series that friends who know me, who know that I like stealth games, have frequently told me that I need to play is Styx. And with the trailer for the third entry just recently released, I figured now is a good time to jump in. Also, one of my Lenten sacrifices is to not pick up any new releases until Easter, so why not chip away at that backlog? These games exist in that AA space between smaller indie projects and your big-budget releases, and they've managed to gain a cult classic status among stealth fans. The general sentiment among those fans is that the second game is superior in most ways, but despite knowing that, it's said that you really should start with the original. That's because Styx, Master of Shadows, is one of those rare cases, a game with a story that is both highly original and feels like it actually matters. This title is over 10 years old now, so I will be mentioning some spoilers. There's good material here for a spiritual reflection. But first, is the gameplay actually worth experiencing? As a stealth fan, I'm probably biased, but even with some jankiness, the fact remains that this is an easy game to recommend if you're the type of gamer who takes sneaking around very seriously. I'm going to start by getting my criticisms out of the way, and I'll also try to limit my references to Thief, though I do have to begin by drawing a few comparisons. Unlike that series, Styx uses a third-person perspective, and is very much designed with that in mind. What I mean by this is that the player is expected to swivel your camera around those corners, getting a wider perspective than your actual character's line of sight can provide. In a first-person title like Thief, where your sight is more limited, the game has to be designed around that. For instance, there's a greater emphasis on ambient sounds. In addition to footsteps, you'll find that guards will often be humming or whistling or even talking to themselves while they go about their duties. You're unlikely to be surprised when turning a corner unless you got reckless and stopped paying attention. Those kind of details, while still present to a degree, are a little less common in Styx. It's easier here to get spotted when creeping into a new area, as a guard may be standing at attention without any audio clues. As the designers may simply figure, well, it's a third-person game. The player can just swivel the camera around and see everything. Obviously, this is not unique to Styx. I love Splinter Cell, and those games will do the same thing. But it's worth mentioning, as if you're trying to play more immersively and not take advantage of being a floating, disembodied cameraman/puppet master, the game may punish you here and there with rapidly alerted guards. Speaking of taking advantage of things, the game also presents you with several magical abilities, afforded by your character's helpful drug addiction to a substance called amber. These abilities include creating clones capable of passing through tight spaces, throwing levers, and generally making mischief, and also notably, you can turn invisible, even silencing your movements after a few upgrades, thus allowing you to breeze through essentially any area if you have the amber to expend. I'm fine with cheap powers like invisibility being in a stealth game, provided that they are optional. I should be able to sneak through every area the old-fashioned way. And that's mostly the case here, but there are a few sections where it seems that if you want to avoid detection, you're really supposed to go invisible. And I always feel like I'm letting myself down a little when I do so. While I'm being critical, I should also warn players that there is a lot of profanity in this game, though it may surprise some to hear that I'm not always strictly against that. A common weakness of Christian entertainment is when writers will have even their villains avoid using foul language, like a human trafficker who never utters four-letter words. That kind of thing makes it hard for me to take the world or the characters very seriously. I specifically rejected this approach when writing my own novel, Dead and Godless. But on that topic, Styx veers rather hard in the opposite direction, with your main character dropping so many F-bombs that he may start to feel less like a grizzled professional thief and more like a 14-year-old who's been binging on South Park. So do be aware of that, but thankfully, crude humor is not the heart of this experience. At its heart, Styx is a dedicated stealth game made by people who clearly love dedicated stealth games. To that end, I have to say that the most common complaints, the hit or miss humor and the clunkiness of the combat, those factors don't really bother me. I can look past some cringy jokes. I'm sure I make some of those at times. And if I stumble into a sword fight, you better believe that I'm reloading that last save. Just getting detected is, for a player like myself, a sign that I'm playing wrong. And with these levels, there's no need for that to happen. The world of Styx provides some fantastic stealth playgrounds, complete with torches to extinguish, lots of strategic verticality, and those all-important crawl spaces. Man, more games need crawl spaces. If it seems that the path to your destination is just too well guarded, you can pretty much guarantee that there is an alternate route, or two or three, or perhaps some helpful chandelier to drop and create a distraction. You're constantly weighing your options while navigating these spaces, and that is a wonderful thing. What is less wonderful is that you will get very, very familiar with these areas, because although Styx gives you 7 main stages, several of those get recycled and reused, such that it's really more like 4 major spaces that the game takes place in. You'll reach a key destination around mid-game, and from there head back the way you came. And while these, again, are good stages, and feature some changes like a new time of day, which affects where shadows lie, and of course new guard patterns, still, it does hurt to simply know what's coming. I wonder what kind of area I'll uncover next. That sort of anticipation is mostly gone. What will keep you going is the solid stealth mechanics and the unique hooks of the plot. Styx is an anti-hero with a stress on the anti part of that term. Now, there are 2 ways to write an effective anti-hero. One is the popular rogue with a heart of gold. Sure, they may be rough around the edges, ordinarily fine with stepping on others to get what they want. But when it matters most, when push really comes to shove, they do the right thing. The other approach is the character who is truly just looking out for number 1. He's a bad man, but he lives in a bad world, a world that's so evil that it makes his personal evil seem not so bad. Styx falls into this latter category. He is not a good guy, but compared to most of the pivotal figures in this story, he may represent the lesser evil of the bunch. Even that is not always certain. I might be giving him too much credit here, but at the very least, he certainly has understandable reasons for seeking revenge. This narrative is a tale of both vengeance and mystery. Even your main character is not really sure why he must do what he's doing for a good part of the game. And this all ties into a major twist that unfolds about halfway through your adventure. A twist that I'm going to be spoiling. So if that's something you want to avoid, the Lord will forgive you if you click away now. I should let it be known that I have not played Cyanide's previous game, Of Orcs and Men, an RPG which takes place in the same universe and provides further lore that fleshes out both the world and several of the characters. Playing that would likely enhance things here, but this plot is strong enough to stand on its own. Throughout your journey, your character's mind will be assaulted by voices which direct him, essentially compelling him toward some mysterious objectives, with one of his key goals being to infiltrate the very deepest depths of the tower's prison and set free an unknown figure, an important friend whom our protagonist cannot quite seem to remember. Earlier, I mentioned how one of your main abilities involves spawning clones which you can then control. Well, as it turns out, the character you play as is not the original Styx. You are a clone, one who has just enough sense of self to resent being ordered around by voices inside his head. Upon freeing the original, Styx treats you much like you've treated the clones which you've spawned during your quest, as a disposable instrument that has no further use. But you're a little more resilient than them, so you set out to free your mind and settle the score. There are other characters who may help or hinder you along the way, but like your original, they're generally just looking to use you and, well, everyone else. This is a world where Marxist critical theory is actually true, and basically all relationships boil down to power dynamics. If you get betrayed, that's your own fault. You should have been smarter and betrayed the other guy first. But then, that's only possible if your mind is your own. As I mentioned, your Styx is very tired of doing what he's told. He wants to truly be himself, and that means deciding for himself what he will believe and what path he will follow in the future. And again, that echoes a lot of us at a certain stage in life, when we feel like,
whatever, I do what I want.
I may not have been battling voices in my head like Styx, but I too kind of felt that way back when I went through my atheist phase during those late teenager, young adult years. I had to wrestle with that question. Why do I believe what I do? Is it just because that's what I've always been told to believe? And so I drifted away from the faith, from all faith, for a time. I won't go too deep into my reversion story here, but part of what helped that along was a recognition that you're not really making free choices unless you understand those things that you're choosing between. Do I really understand the Christian faith that I'm walking away from? I realized that at the time I was getting a caricature of the faith from the atheist authors that I'd been reading, guys like Christopher Hitchens and Richard Dawkins and Sam Harris. If I was going to really make up my own mind, I should probably take a look at some actual Christian writers like G.K. Chesterton and C.S. Lewis. Obviously, those authors made me rethink a whole lot. And when it comes specifically to the "I'm done being told what to do" attitude of Styx, some thoughts of St. Augustine especially come to mind. Just as Socrates, the father of philosophy, would reason that the wisest are those who know how foolish they are, St. Augustine would reason that the freest are those who know how enslaved they are. We like to romanticize that I will be my own master. But Augustine was not a romantic. He was what we might today call a brutal realist. He believed that no matter what, you're going to be enslaved to something. If not country or king, then you might end up enslaved to your passions, perhaps to your animalistic hunger for pleasure or power. So many are enslaved to urges that are beneath us. Would it not be better, thought Augustine, to have as your master the highest, greatest thing conceivable? And that's kind of the definition of God. In a paradoxical twist, when you surrender your will to God, you actually become more free, not less. And that makes sense because, as Christ tells us, God is truth. I like using the Wright brothers to illustrate this principle. They gained the freedom to fly through the sky, not because they said, "I'll decide for myself how the laws of aerodynamics work." No, they rather were able to build those first aircrafts because they surrendered to the truth of nature's laws. It was working in accordance with those truths that expanded what they and what we are free to do. Our relationship with God is ultimately like that. Contrary to what we might first assume, we end up most free when, like Jesus in the Garden of Gethsemane, we make that choice to say, "Not my will, but thy will be done." And that's all I've got for today. May you go with God, may you like and subscribe, and may we pray for one another. Until we meet again.